We might have a problem here.
How is the iPhone Pro 15 Max? Is it really that great of a phone? Well, find out in this very thorough review of what the iPhone 15 Pro Max really does offer, coming from moi, an Android user. So what do I exactly think of this phone? Let's talk about it first, because we all know why this gets so much hate in the community, because we feel that there is a lack of understanding about specifications and technology when it comes to phones. Let's talk about what iPhone 15 Pro Max really does offer and why it attracted me to make the purchase in the first place. As you originally know, if you watched the first video of where I unboxed the iPhone 15 Pro Max, is because I wanted it specifically because not only have they did the big shift to USB-C, but on top of that, they did feature this phone as a gaming device. Would this really have the possibility of doing so? And I will address about the different overheating issues that I've experimented, as you saw, and how hot can this phone really get. If you don't know who I am already, I am Chris Mizo. I will talk about the iPhone 15 Pro Max with you guys to see if this is the right phone for you, or if you're even thinking of switching from Android to an iPhone. First off, I do gotta say the biggest thing, especially I came from a S22 Ultra, you'll notice the rounded bezeled edges. It has a really nice design to it, and it makes it really nice to hold. You can really fit it in your hand really nicely. Now, I do have larger hands than most. Another thing I do have to mention is when you do unbox your iPhone 15 Pro Max, it only comes with a USB-C cable, does not come with an adapter. Luckily, if you have an adapter already, you can just plug it in and it can charge up to 30 watts. So when you do purchase your phone, just make sure you charge it to 100% before use. You can limit the battery usage to up to 80%, which is something that has been around for a long time. Fortunately, for those who are under the 15, say you're on the 14, then that setting is not apparent. Instead, you have to upgrade just to have that battery limit setting. Personally, to me, I don't use it, especially if you have something like Apple Care. It's completely unnecessary to use. Just take full advantage of your phone. You'll notice a big difference when there is a 20% less charge on your phone.
Now, when it comes to battery charging and how long a battery actually lasts for an iPhone, it's really impressive. I've really never seen this battery ever really go under 50%. Have a full charge exactly when I need it. And I've used this phone for 2 to 3 days without charge, really.
Now, the biggest feature that they improved over the predecessors of iPhones is that they added an action button. When I hold the action button on my phone, I can just long press what I want it to do, and then it will just send out a tweet. Do you remember when Tim Cook was talking about how the action button, how you can hold it down and it would react the same way as the predecessor iPhones when it came to silencing your phone, where you can just long press it and then you can actually silence the phone, make it silencio, to the point where it's just like the old iPhone? Well, apparently, even with the action button, that does not exist. They don't have a quick press to where, for example, I have it set to tweet and it would just tweet. Instead, you have to set it to one function. And it is not really a multi-function action button. Hopefully that is something that they could somewhat update in the near future. Shortcuts is also a really nice feature that Apple does have. It's practically like coding, just like a baby version of it. So you can actually create a small program practically out of shortcuts. You can create it to tweet, you can give it menus, you can create, just like I have a menu to where I can select whether I just want to tweet or maybe I want to send out my latest video. There are options when it comes to shortcuts, and it's a really nice feature to take advantage of if you have an Apple phone, and it's not limited to just the iPhone 15 Pro Max. It is also available on other iPhones. What does the iPhone 15 Pro Max feature that's different than other devices? It does have the A17 Pro, where it is a TSMC fabricated chip, where it is a 3nm process node. And then on top of it, it is slightly better than the A16. Now, there isn't a large jump when it comes to performance, and hence this brings up the whole question about overheating, which I will get to in a moment. Another really nice feature that they do offer, which isn't really quite new, especially for us in the Android community, is that it does feature wireless charging. When it comes to wireless charging, they're talking about the back of here because it is MagSafe. MagSafe is just practically a magnetic connection, and when it hooks up to that magnetic connection, it charges up your phone. The nice thing about what Apple does feature is that they do have a ton of accessories that do come with MagSafe. So they have different accessories where you can put it inside of your car, you could put it around your neck as a lanyard, and they have different ideas of how you can use it. Even wallets that will stick right in the back of an iPhone. Possibilities are endless when it comes to MagSafe. It's just a really nice feature to have.
Dynamic Island has improved much on the iPhone 15 Pro Max. As you can see, if you go into things such as Spotify and you're listening to just music here, when you play a song, when you go up here, it shows the song playing. Or if you decide to charge your phone, instead it gives you a nice battery percentage when you plug in your device. iPhone 15 Pro Max's Dynamic Island tries to enhance your experience when you are using your phone. So it's not a bad feature, but sometimes that notch can be pretty annoying.
Haptic feedback is definitely a lot more noticeable when it comes to Apple's devices. I always thought it's not really that much of a big deal, especially coming from other Android phones. The haptic feedback is actually a really nice violent vibration to where you can actually really feel it inside of your pocket. Someone's giving you a notification or a text message or even a phone call. Because of how well the haptic feedback works, you know exactly what you're receiving. Sure, I received haptic feedback before on my Ultra devices, but it's not quite the same. It's definitely on another level. You are notified a whole lot better in that sense. Audio quality wise, phone calls come in nice and crisp. I don't have issues when it comes through speakerphone, nor do I have issues when I do have the headset or the phone up to my ear. So the nice thing is you get nice clear calls, and it does also feature a noise suppression feature to where it cancels the noise in the background if you're in a crowded market. Now, a lot of Bluetooth devices also feature that, such as the Sony XM4s, which I currently have. They also have that feature automatically built into the headset. Audio quality wise, iPhone has been excellent. The signal works great. The Wi-Fi connection works great, but it does have its weird issues and quirks when it comes to its Bluetooth. Now, when I use my Sony headset, if I answer the phone from the iPhone itself, that instead it will pick up on the phone side and not go straight to my Bluetooth device. Hopefully that is something they also fix in the near future. I do notice the really nice thing about the iPhone 15 Pro Max is that in iOS 17, it is very nice and convenient to access the phone. Now, the biggest difference is that when you're used to swiping up on any of these functions, you just press on the function and you just let go and it will go into it, as you can customize it. Now, as you know, Android is also customizable when it comes to their lock screens as well. You can set your always on display to however type of font that you want, the size of it, and it did come out on Android first. Now, iOS did come out and refine the product just a bit, but it is a really nice lock screen. It is really convenient, and I do like how detailed the feature is, such as how my wife's head is just overlapping on the always on display when it comes to time. Now, granted, it's not the biggest feature that the lock screen does have, but it is also nice to know that it has that type of capability. Now, the funny thing is, to bring up the overheating issue, when I was adjusting the lock screen and put this wallpaper up for the lock screen, the phone started to heat up slightly. Now, it didn't overheat to a crazy amount of heat, but it heated up to at least 35 degrees Celsius. Now, that is relatively warm in your hands, but it's not going to be to the point where it is overheating. But I will talk more on the overheating issue, as you saw how hot this phone can really get. Moving on to the next subject here. Now, I feel personally on iOS 17, it is really nice As you know, on Samsung devices, when you access this phone, that you don't always go into a menu. Now the funny thing is, it claims it is 120 Hertz when you go into the screen. It isn't quite 120 Hertz. It actually ends up doing a battery saving mode where it scrolls about at 80 to 90 Hertz at the most when you are scrolling through your screen, and only uses 120 Hertz when necessary. So what does that exactly mean? So for your phone to actually go into 120 Hertz, you could go into a game where it requires 120 Hertz. But also you got to remember to enable those settings, otherwise it's going to look really choppy, especially to a person that isn't really the average consumer. It still seems to be well behind when it comes to Android, when it comes to the menu screens. Now the way it is, it doesn't really have a menu screen. It's kind of like you just have a wallpaper, and you have all your apps listed on your wallpaper where you're scrolling and scrolling. And that's just how iOS has always been, as long as it's been, but hopefully we can see a big adjustment, especially in the upcoming future when Apple hopefully does redesign their software. Otherwise, it just really feels out of date. But it is a nice touch that they finally did add widgets. Again, this happened way back then. Same thing with notifications, where you can actually pull down. But what I really like about the iPhone 15 Pro Max is the whole gestures control. The biggest thing that I do like about this phone is the animations are really nice and smooth and simple. It just makes the phone a better experience and makes it feel like that you're not waiting for your phone to produce what you need to. And instead, it's producing exactly what you need your phone to do when you're scrolling through messaging apps, or you're scrolling through the gallery, or you're scrolling through different apps of your phone. Now, I do gotta mention, the Face ID works excellent. It works really well, but if you're wearing sunglasses, especially when you live in places like Florida or California, you to take off your sunglasses to just do the Face ID, because they don't have a ultrasonic sensor when it comes to biometric scanning. One of the biggest features that you notice that they'll take away on a Apple device, on iPhone 15 Pro Max, that they still don't feature is a lack of multitasking. That's a feature that more than likely you'll miss, especially if you heavily use the feature. It was just really nice to be able to open up a spreadsheet and put in all your information for your business. Then it just makes it a lot more complicated because you have to switch between cards to do so. That's something that I feel that should be a necessary part, especially nowadays. And with the processor that iPhone 15 Pro Max has, I don't see why they don't add a multitasking feature. And hopefully they will do something like that in the near future. Another feature that I did notice is that the keyboard also feels dated. When you look at their keyboard, it seems pretty nice and widespread, really easy to use. But as you notice, unlike Google, you cannot long press the keys where you can produce a symbol. It's also inconvenient for you to also open up the GIFs tab, just like how on Google keyboards you can just switch over to an emoji to the GIFs, but instead you have to go into a optional menu to where you add the GIFs on iOS 17. So that's another feature that I do notice that is lacking. If I went into something like an app here, in order to send a GIF, I would have to hit this plus button here, and you'll get a menu that'll actually come up just like this. And when it does, you have to scroll down, and then you'll see where you can add the GIFs. Now, a lot of people complain because when you hit that plus button, that you can't send something like a gallery photo. But you can. All you have to do is long press it, and then you get your gallery. That is something that a lot of people complained about iOS 17. But personally, to me, I feel like it's really nice and fluid to use. And the biggest part I notice, and the biggest difference, is the brightness. The adaptive brightness works better, personally, to me, on an iPhone. On Android, it's always lacking. It always seems like there's some sort of delay, that the screen goes bright for no apparent reason when you are in a shaded area. But iPhone's really good when it comes to its adaptive display, and it does drop brightness when necessary.
The iPhone 15 Pro Max, it features up to 48 megapixels. Now the 48 megapixels isn't exactly quite that, unless you're shooting in RAW. Instead, it's split between the 4 cameras that the iPhone has. Of course, the 3 are visible, and the one's kind of hidden as a smaller camera. The iPhone Pro Max, it can shoot with HEIF or JPG photos. The HEIF are always the photos that usually take that are live photos, and now it can go up to 3x and finally up to 5x. So what happened to the 10x that Apple talked about in the press conference? The 10x is subtracted by the 2x crop sensor that the iPhone Pro Max does have. And it also has a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera, and it has a very large sensor with it, especially because now it is a 13 millimeter with a 2.2 f-stop, which is a really large aperture.
The photos come out really excellent, and it is quite an astonishing improvement over its predecessor in that sense. The video is also unmatched. It is amazing on the iPhone 15 Pro Max, and is something, if you are into photos and videos, this is something to really look into or consider when you are getting a Pro Max. I also like the fact that Apple Carplay works really well when it comes to their Apple devices. Carplay works excellent because when you plug into an iPhone, that it actually functions really nice and smooth. It doesn't give you any type of errors when you enter into Maps or Waze or Google Maps, which I personally use. The UI is very functional, and it doesn't really give any type of issues. But I did notice that there is a slight quirk when it does come to Apple CarPlay. When you are navigating somewhere and it has instructions to where the navigator is telling you where to go, then if you get a message, it's kind of apparent when you are trying to speak into Siri, trying to send out a message while Google's trying to talk to you about where to go. So you get overlapping voices, which is kind of annoying when you have messages or trying to send out messages because you're not sure what message is being conveyed. So that is something that I personally noticed on the Apple side, where it is not as good as Android's devices, where when you go into something like Android Auto, it's a little bit more clear when you are speaking on a phone. I will explain about the charging speed and the different types of heat that we've experienced. So I just came back from my quick walk with my dog, and as you can see, the device is charging through Anker's fast charger. I do have a 60-watt adapter on top of it, but it is getting pretty hot. And let me show you right here how hot it exactly is getting. It's getting about 41 degrees Celsius. Now, who knows if this will affect it long term, but this is something that we'll see. I'll keep you updated to see how hot this phone can actually get while fast charging. So we're about 45 minutes into charging the iPhone 15 Pro Max. Let's see where the temperature is. So it seems to be cooling off. It seems like the hot zone is actually up here right next to the camera. If you look at it, as you can see, the temperatures are a bit higher right where the camera side is. We're also about 47 minutes in now. And to get an idea of how the battery is looking after 47 minutes on a 65-watt charger, coming from 20%, now it is at 80%. So the phone's about at full charge. It is at 100%. And it took about an hour and 40 minutes to fully charge the phone. As you can see, let's see what temperature it's at now. And you can see it's much lower than it originally was while the phone was charging. What I'm doing now is I'm recording in the log, and it has been about 17 minutes, going into 18 minutes now. And I plan to do this test for about 40 to 45 minutes to see what type of temperatures we can pull out the iPhone 15 Pro Max, as there were reports of overheating. I'm getting an average about between 42 to about 43 degrees Celsius. Just to give you an idea of what the room temperature is currently, it is about at 76 degrees Fahrenheit, which is roughly about 24 degrees Celsius. With charging on, it still hasn't gotten to the point where it has been way overheated. And again, this is while it is charging and recording and log. So it is processing a lot of information. So let's flip this around and see where the heat is really dissipating from. Now, I believe a lot of the heat is dissipating from around this surface area right here, close to the camera area. So you can see a surface temperature for the back, 43.6. You can see the number kind of just jumping wherever. It's kind of cooling off. It's at about 40.3 degrees Celsius. And this again is recording in 45 minutes of log. Now, will it practically do the same thing gaming? So luckily we didn't hit the point of thermal throttling. It does seem to reach higher temperatures once you play games such as Genshin Impact. As you can see, I am reaching temperatures of close to about 45 to 46 degrees, even 47 degrees Celsius, as you can see. And from there, it throttles. You'll notice it in game, especially because there'll be some sort of lag, especially while you're climbing in Genshin Impact. Now, mind you, this is with the highest settings possibly available on Genshin Impact. So everything is set to high. The only thing I did not change was the motion blur. I left it as high instead of extreme. All the other graphical settings are set in the highest mode. And Genshin Impact does warn you that if you do go into that mode, that your phone may overheat because of the type of power it does require out of the game. So as you can see here, towards the back, it's starting to cool off a little bit because of how I stopped playing. But as I mentioned earlier, and as you saw earlier, you can reach pretty high temperatures while in game. So if you do plan to play any console games, which I will test it out in the near future once Resident Evil is released, and more console games that will be released on the iPhone 15 Pro Max and compared to the Asus ROG Ally, will have a better idea of what it's capable of. Now, this is charging at the same time as I am playing games, so overheating can be very real. So overheating is quite apparent, and for me personally, it's only been heavy usage when it came to Genshin Impact, where I felt most of the heat. I also felt a lot of the heat when charging up the phone. I did not feel the heat when it came into apps such as Instagram. I did not feel the heat when it came into apps such as Twitter, also known as X. I did not also feel the heat when it came into Safari, which I never use on this phone. Personally, I've used Firefox. I've never experienced any type of heat issues besides the very specific situations. I even recorded and logged with the iPhone 15 Pro Max, and it did not heat up to the point where it was at uncontrollable levels. Now, it will throttle, obviously, when you go into games such as Genshin Impact, and it even warned you because you're practically overclocking your SoC, which isn't really healthy for it, and it has poor ventilation because of that. Now, what I wanted to explain to you about the whole overheating issue is that it lacks a proper cooling system. Now, this phone is supposed to be designed for gaming. They shouldn't have ever claimed it as designed for gaming because it will give you issues. They're going to have to fix the issue about the A17 Pro because it is reaching levels to where it is overheating. I can see it happening. I haven't pushed it to quite that point yet. Even it is an issue if it's hitting about 47 degrees Celsius. That is very hot for a phone to reach. What they should have established, because they named this phone a gaming phone, is at least a vapor chamber cooling system. What that practically does is water cools the phone. Now you're probably thinking, wouldn't that weigh the phone down? Really, it won't. It's just practically a thin piece of metal, and it has chambers in there where it is filled with water and converts to steam and exhausts it in the most coolest areas of the phone. Well, it would be inside the phone, and it would be a lot more efficient, where it's claimed to be a lot more powerful than the PS4, but the only difference is that PS4 did not have thermal throttling. The reason why? Because it actually has fans to cool off the console. Now, I could go on and on about exactly the reason why this is a big issue when it comes to Apple before prematurely announcing things like this, because now in the next software update they will have to be forced to underclock it or limit the SoC to prevent it from overheating. For everybody that's out there that has a iPhone 15 Pro Max or a iPhone 15 Pro, you're gonna experience it only, and now this is from my personal experience from attempting to see how hot this phone can really get. And you can only get it to the point where you're really pushing it if you game a lot on your phone with the highest graphical settings. If you like to charge your phone for long periods of time, especially if you're trying to fast charge your phone, say with a portable charger, and you're trying to record and log for some reason an hour video, that's going to be a problematic issue. If you're planning to use the phone for those specific issues, then I don't really suggest the iPhone 15 Pro Max for you, and just wait till the next year, because it should be a much more improved device. I gotta say, the design is really beautiful on the phone, even though they practically look all the same. It looks practically almost like the iPhone 14 Pro Max, pretty much identical, but it is much lighter. I promise you, when you hold it, you can feel a big difference in weight, even though it's only a slight difference in grams. The volume buttons are really nice, and you can notice the different feel, especially because the action button is a lot more smaller on the device, which I accidentally activated the flashlight. This is something that you can consider. If I were to give a rating on a phone, I would give this about a 7 out of 10. Now, this is a very honest opinion of what I personally think on the phone. Will it tempt Android users to switch into an iPhone? Possibly, which I will do another video, where the S22 Ultra goes up against the iPhone 15 Pro Max, which is going to be a very interesting video, even though the S22 Ultra is about 2 years old nearly. It could be very well capable of competing against the iPhone 15 Pro Max. But personally, to me, a 7 out of 10. It is an excellent phone. It is very functional. It does exactly what it needs to, but I would have gave it a higher rating if Tim Cook and the team, the Apple engineering team, I don't know what they were thinking of when they decided to label this phone as a gaming phone, or even a type of phone where you're going to constantly record on, such as they did like this whole Selena Gomez video and everything, which you shouldn't use a phone to record professionally. And again, that's just me going on a rant about what I personally think. If you're going to game on a device, go into a gaming device. If you're going to make a video, get a proper camera in order to do so. There's nothing wrong with doing it on an iPhone if you're traveling and you just want to play your game, but I don't suggest trying to push your phone to the limits. Otherwise, you might regret it, especially if you don't have Apple Care. Fam guys, I hope you found this content very useful. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you know anybody else who is interested in getting an iPhone 15 Pro Max, make sure you share this video with them, especially if they are an Android user. And also, if you're not part of the Big Wonderful Fan Band, make sure to go down and hit the subscribe button for more. And don't forget to hit the notification bell. And also, make sure you follow my X handle right here, as it is the same as my TikTok and IG as well. So fam guys, are you willing to get the iPhone 15 Pro Max? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. This is Chris Mizo, signing out.